side, traditionally almost the enemy of the establishment, and then all these bureaucrats and government officials on the other, you're all working together.
Well, everything both technically and artistically we've done ourselves. The only thing we needed from those bureaucrats were permissions, because usually such big events, the cultural officials, they've dictated the repertoire. Therefore, they could suggest or even force us to take all kinds of boring, old-fashioned communist crooners, whom we didn't want to have there at all. But thanks to the support from Alexander Yakovlev, they have helped us in all those delicate matters. So our selection of performing artists has been really controversial, revolutionary, I would say, for that time. Among those rock bands, there have even been some underground bands. And people from the Ministry of Culture, they have revolted against that. They said, well, absolutely unacceptable. This is a high responsibility event, and we must have well-proven artists, not some doubtful rock and rollers. But we told them that we rule the concert, and if they have something against it, we said, okay, we'll call the Central Committee of the Communist Party. Would you like to speak with them? And they said, no, okay, go ahead.
Obviously, this is all taking place in a time of complete national tragedy, but at the same time, it must have been quite exciting.
The mood was very enthusiastic because things like that, they've never happened in the Soviet Union before. And everyone knew that it's like a grassroots initiative, that it wasn't invented by the Communist Party or the KGB, that the idea came from below.
State television was there to record it. There's talk of a video and a record to help radiation victims and promote disarmament. The latest lesson the Soviet Union has learnt from Chernobyl is that misfortune can promote national unity.
The mood was like something unbelievable is happening. People still couldn't really believe that we've done this.
In little more than 2 weeks, Artyemi and just a handful of music enthusiasts put together the biggest rock concert the USSR had ever seen. There was a real sense that something had changed.
My most cherished and lasting memory of that day is actually the time when I left the concert hall, and I left before the concert was over. Alla Pugacheva, she was still singing there, and I, absolutely alone, I walked from the Olympic Stadium to Leningradsky railway station because I was heading to the Leningrad Rock Festival. Alla Pugacheva was still singing, the concert was going on, so all the area around the Olympic Stadium was absolutely empty, and this was very romantic. I was feeling like a lonely hero, so I've done all this, and now absolutely alone I'm walking away and heading for new rock and roll adventures. And this was really a very heartwarming feeling.
Artyemi Troitsky. He was speaking to me, Rebecca Kesby, for Witness History.
You're listening to the BBC World Service with a new series exploring automation's impact on the future of work.
Something like 60% of occupations will have parts of their job being done by machines.
I'm Daniel Suskind, and in this 3-part series, I'm going to get an idea of how automation might affect all of us by zooming in on the United States.
Automation Nation, Wednesday at 8 and 19 GMT. And in 30 minutes, Sport Today with Mas Furuki.
It's been one of the worst kept secrets, but after failing to win the Spanish league title, Zinedine Zidane is stepping away from Real Madrid. So where next and who's next on the managerial merry-go-round? Plus we look ahead to tennis's French Open.
The newsroom is next on the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
At 18 hours GMT, welcome to the newsroom from the BBC World Service. I'm Alex Ritson. A new map of dark matter may mean Einstein's theory of general relativity, his attempt at a theory of everything, will have to be revised.
Our Milky Way galaxy is surrounded by this huge halo of invisible dark matter that surrounds the galaxy and surrounds almost all galaxies in the universe.
The 1994 genocide. The French President Emmanuel Macron asks the people of Rwanda for forgiveness. A top Japanese doctor warns an Olympic variant of COVID could emerge. Fears of a second deadly volcanic eruption in the Congo. 600,000 people are ordered to leave their homes. And...
Sorry. Every time you ask me a question, I hold my breath. I'm so scared.
Should losing tennis stars have to face questions from journalists? You're listening to the BBC World Service, live from London.
BBC News, I'm John Shea. An international team of astronomers has created the largest ever map of the distribution of dark matter. They say the invisible substance, which is thought to make up about 80% of all material in the universe, is more spread out than first predicted. Dark matter distorts light from distant stars. Palab Ghosh reports.
By measuring the distortion of 100 million galaxies, researchers produced the most detailed map ever created of how it's spread across the cosmos. The map is colour-coded, such that dark matter appears as purple patches, with bright spots where it's most concentrated. It surprised astronomers because it's at odds with the current theory of cosmology, which predicted that the matter would be slightly more clumped together. Astronomers believe that we're at the start of a new revolution in cosmology that will give us a fuller understanding of how the universe began and how it will evolve.
The Rwandan President Paul Kagame has praised his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron for, as he put it, speaking the truth about the role of France in the genocide of 1994. Speaking in the Rwandan capital Kigali, the French president said his country had not listened to warnings about the impending massacres, and he asked Rwandans for forgiveness. Mr. Kagame said Mr. Macron's words were more valuable than an apology. A French MP, Bruno Bonnell, explained why Mr. Macron stopped short of offering one.
He was not there to say sorry. He was there to say that sometime we have to make points in the course of time. After 27 years, we just do recognize that France had its part. What I heard from survivors, and rightly so, they were expecting more. But the more would mean that France was an accomplice, which is not the case.
Somalia's political leaders have agreed a way forward to choose a new president after months of delay and an eruption of violence in the capital, Mogadishu. The Prime Minister, Mohamed Hussein Roble, and the presidents of regional states signed a deal to begin the process within 60 days. Clan elders will choose MPs, who will then elect the new head of state. The organisers of an elite cycling event, which was due to take place next month in Belarus, have announced its cancellation. The decision to scrap the European Track Championships follows widespread condemnation of the forced diversion of a passenger plane to Minsk on Sunday. An opposition journalist on board, Roman Protasiewicz, was arrested. Alex Capstick reports.
Germany and the Netherlands announced they were boycotting next month's competition, while the head of the British team suggested it would be impossible to hold it in Belarus, as all airlines had been urged to avoid the country's airspace. It's the second time this year that Alexander Lukashenko's government has lost the chance to stage a major international sports tournament.
World News from the BBC. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has condemned the overhaul of electoral rules for Hong Kong's legislature approved on Thursday. Mr. Blinken said the sweeping changes, which limit the number of directly elected legislators, would prevent people in Hong Kong from meaningfully participating in their own governance. He called on China to allow the voices of everyone in the territory to be heard. There's a mass exodus underway from parts of Goma in the Democratic Republic of Congo after people were ordered to evacuate because of fears of a second volcanic eruption. More than 30 people are known to have died when the Nyiragongo volcano first blew at the weekend. Tremors and powerful aftershocks have continued. Tens of thousands are fleeing Goma, many on foot. The United Nations Human Rights Council has agreed to open an investigation into this month's conflict between Israel and the militant group Hamas. 24 out of 47 countries voted in favour of the resolution, which was brought by the Organisation of Islamic Cooperation and the Palestinian delegation to the UN. Hamas, which controls the Gaza Strip, has welcomed the decision, but Israel described it as a moral failure and said it would not cooperate with the investigation. One of Brazil's most popular samba composers, Nelson Sargento, has died with COVID-19 at the age of 96. Although he had prostate cancer, doctors say he had received 2 doses of a coronavirus vaccine. Throughout his life, Nelson Sargento campaigned for the preservation of traditional forms of Rio's samba music. His hits included The Beauty of the Landscape. Sargento had spent much of his life in Mangueira, a working-class area of Rio de Janeiro, and he'd been made honorary president of the Samba School there. BBC News.
You're listening to the newsroom from the BBC World Service with me, Alex Ritson. It may be time to rethink our universe. Researchers have mapped out the distribution of dark matter in 100 million galaxies, and it's led to some new ideas about the way our reality is built. We'll hear more on that in a moment from one of the researchers. But first, what is dark matter? Here's the newsroom's Peter Goffin.
Think of dark matter as the unknown variable, like X in a maths problem. It can't be detected by scientific instruments, and we don't know exactly what it is. But we know dark matter is there because it affects the physical objects all around it. Scientists have found the universe doesn't always work the way they expect it to. For example, astronomers have observed galaxies rotating far faster than they should, given the mass of the stars in them. That suggests there's something else there, adding extra mass. That material is what we call dark matter, and scientists have estimated it makes up 80% of all matter in existence.
So, what is the new discovery about dark matter, and how will it affect what we know about our world? I've been speaking to Niall Jeffrey, one of the authors of the study.
What we've found are only hints, and hints, though, that other experiments have seen before, but very exciting hints, because as you say, if these results are true, that the universe appears smoother than we predict, then we might have to rewrite physics.
So, scientists are really excited by this. Can you, in language I can understand, tell me what you found?
Well, so the first thing is that we've made an extremely large map of dark matter across the night sky. And so dark matter is something that fills the entire universe. In fact, the universe is full of this almost scaffolding of dark matter that we call the cosmic web. And it's the majority of the matter in the universe.
How do you know it exists, though, if you can't see it?
Well, so even because it fills the universe and because it has mass, because it's matter, it still pulls things through gravity. So we can see its effect by its gravitational pull, and also the way it pulls on light. So as light travels through patches of space with lots of dark matter in it, it gets warped and distorted. So if we look at a very distant galaxy and there's some dark matter in between us and that galaxy, then the galaxy will appear stretched. So if we look for specific patterns of this stretching, it means then we can go back and say, there's some dark matter there. And that's how we've made this map.
Now, Einstein's general theory of relativity essentially created the concept of space-time, the fact that the two were kind of interchangeable, maybe, in a way. Was he right? Where do we go?
Yes, so Einstein's theory of general relativity tells us that space and time are not really separate things. They're extremely linked. And depending on how fast you're traveling, the two things can stretch into each other. So time can appear slower, or distances can appear longer or shorter. And in fact, our own universe is expanding, and this is described by Einstein's theory of general relativity. But any changes to general relativity that cosmologists will now look for in the future will not break the idea of space and time, probably. That's fundamental almost. But in fact, what we'll have to do is find ways to change general relativity that don't break the fact that around us in the universe, general relativity appears to be true. So one way people are looking for changes to Einstein's theory of gravity are going into these cosmic voids, these big empty spaces in the scaffolding of the universe, because people think there, well, maybe in there gravity could appear different, and that would tell us what changes we can make to Einstein's theory.
Last question. You've made the map of where dark matter is. Is there any near me?
There's dark matter all around us, but unlike normal matter, like what we're made of, dark matter doesn't stick together because it only interacts through gravity. So our Milky Way galaxy, made up of many, many stars, of which our sun is one, our Milky Way galaxy is surrounded by this huge halo of invisible dark matter that surrounds the galaxy and surrounds almost all galaxies in the universe.
Why does this matter?
Because we don't understand a lot of things about the universe. And fundamentally, the answer is curiosity. You can say lots of arguments for why do we care about finding out about dark matter, and you could say, well, it leads to all sorts of new technologies, breakthroughs in science and the economy. But fundamentally, why do we need to know what the universe is like? And it's fundamentally curiosity.
Dr. Niall Jeffrey from the Dark Energy Survey. The French President Emmanuel Macron has asked Rwandans for forgiveness for his country's failings in the genocide in 1994. Mr. Macron said France had come to recognise its responsibilities in the events and acknowledged that warnings about imminent violence had not been heeded. But he stopped short of apologising and said that his country had not been complicit in the bloodshed. Vivian Nunes reports.
While addressing the crowd at a memorial built upon the mass graves of victims, President Macron said France had effectively stood by a genocidal regime. He admitted that under former President François Mitterrand, France ignored warnings about the impending genocide, but insisted that the country wasn't complicit in the killings of 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus. I remember, says Mr. Macron, speaking in the Rwandan language, Kinyarwanda.
Seuls ceux qui ont traversé la nuit peuvent peut-être.
The French leader said that only survivors of the 1994 genocide could grant the gift of forgiveness. Asked later whether this amounted to an apology, Mr. Macron said that would not be an appropriate way to describe it. Rwanda's main genocide survivor group says it is disappointed, but the country's president, Paul Kagame, welcomed Mr. Macron's words.
His words were something more valuable than an apology. They were the truth.
Mr. Macron's visit to Rwanda is the first by a French president in more than a decade. Paris hopes the trip will normalise tense bilateral relations with Kigali that have lasted more than a quarter of a century, during which time Rwanda switched the country's main diplomatic and teaching language from French to English.
Vivian Nunes. There are just 8 weeks to go before the start of the long-delayed Summer Olympics in Tokyo, and Japan is under a state of emergency as COVID-19 remains high. The International Olympic Committee has insisted the Games will go ahead as scheduled, but the Japanese public is reluctant to take the risk. And now, Japanese doctors' groups have warned the Olympics could cause an explosion of infections. Our Asia-Pacific regional editor, Will Leonardo, told us more.
The head of the Japan Doctors Union, one of the leading associations of doctors in Japan, called Naoto Oyama, he told a news conference that basically if you have tens of thousands of people coming from over 200 countries to Tokyo, there could be a situation in which an Olympic variant might emerge, as well as obviously an expected upsurge in cases. Other scientists have said, the process of new variants emerging isn't necessarily dictated by these kind of events. It could happen anywhere in the world. It's a sign of how stressed these medical officials are about the Olympics. Another doctor from the Tokyo Doctors Association, he's been saying that Tokyo really needs to get to under 100 new cases a day for the Olympics to be held safely. Otherwise, there'll be a huge rebound in cases. And at the moment, despite a state of emergency, you're still on 500 a day.
And of course, it's not just doctors who are expressing concern. 80% of Japanese people in opinion polls consistently say they don't want the Games to go ahead.
Indeed, and that hasn't really changed for weeks, that figure. There's huge worry about the level of infections in Japan at the moment. Barely 5% of the population has been vaccinated. The vaccinations are speeding up slightly, but there's a real worry for the elderly in Japan who haven't, by and large, received their jabs yet. And it's almost every day that there's another official voice coming out warning about the Olympics in Japan. Yesterday it was the Asahi newspaper, one of Japan's major daily newspapers, also an Olympic sponsor, saying that the games should be cancelled and calling on the government to focus on the health of the nation.
So the arguments for cancelling are pretty obvious, but what are the arguments for the games actually going ahead?
Right, so, this is quite interesting. As public opinion has hardened against holding the games, the government has largely kept in line. They've done certain measures to appease the public mood and to try and keep potential outbreaks at bay. They've banned international spectators. They've said that no one can come from abroad to come see any of the events. And a decision on Japanese spectators due in June. So we could be in a situation where we have empty stadiums, empty venues. Press and athletes coming from abroad have to stick to really strict quarantine rules. So they're basically saying that we've put in all these very stringent measures to ensure that we can put on these games safely, and they seem to be unified around that. There was a IOC meeting last week in which minister after minister came out and said, we will put these games on, they will go ahead as planned, and we've got all these measures in place. The charismatic Tokyo governor, Yuriko Koike, says she said it would be a sign of hope after this pandemic, although some reports suggest that she actually may be wavering.
Will Leonardo. You're listening to the newsroom from the BBC World Service. John has a reminder of the main news.
Scientists have created the most detailed map yet of how dark matter is spread out across the universe. Their findings could challenge Einstein's theory of general relativity. The French President Emmanuel Macron has asked Rwandans for forgiveness for his country's failings over the 1994 genocide. And the European Track Cycling Championships, due to be held in Belarus next month, have been cancelled following the arrest of an opposition journalist on a flight that was forced to land in Minsk.
Yes, on Sunday, Belarus scrambled a warplane to divert the flight to the capital, Minsk. The incident has provoked a furious international response. The newsroom's Nigel Adderley is here. Nigel, was the cancellation of the cycling championships expected?
I think it became inevitable because a number of countries, including Germany and the Netherlands, had already pulled out. And with so many nations refusing to allow their airlines to fly into Belarusian airspace following that incident on Sunday, it would have been impossible for so many of the competitors to get there. And it's not the first time a major sporting event has been moved from Belarus. They were due to host or co-host this year's World Ice Hockey Championships with Latvia, but that was withdrawn after many sponsors threatened to pull out in the light of the political unrest resulting from the disputed elections which returned President Lukashenko to power last year. But interestingly, UEFA has awarded Belarus the Women's Under-19 Championships in 2025. Only last month, of course, it's some time away, things can change, but that decision may now come under scrutiny.
Does denying a country sports events really make a difference to those in charge?
Well, I think there's no doubt it does give countries prestige and money when they host international sporting events. And with Belarus being denied the opportunity to host these competitions, the opportunity to suggest there is normality in the country has now been taken away. Of course, we saw the widespread sporting boycotts in apartheid South Africa in the 1970s and 80s, and I think they did contribute in a small way to force longer-term change. But President Lukashenko does use sport as a political tool because the Belarusian Football League played on this time last year, the only place in Europe which was having football during the first part of the pandemic. But a number of Olympic athletes have also been detained after they protested about the election results last year. And as a result of that, the president and his son Victor, who runs the country's International Olympic Committee, they've both been banned from attending this year's Games in Tokyo.
Nigel, thank you. The newsroom's Nigel Adderley. The Chinese government has attacked the Biden administration for asking US intelligence to assess the origins of the pandemic, saying the CIA had a dark history of spreading misinformation. President Biden has ordered a report within 90 days on whether the virus emerged in China from an animal source or from a laboratory accident. Our China correspondent John Sudworth has been investigating the origin of the outbreak since it began.
For more than a year, the idea that the virus might have leaked from a lab has largely been dismissed as a fringe conspiracy by leading scientists, the media, and, of course, China. The theory's association with Donald Trump made it for many just one more piece of disinformation. But in the mouth of President Biden, well, that feels different, even if the angry denials from China's Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian sound all too familiar.
美方根本不在乎事实和真相。
The United States does not care about facts and truth at all, he said, nor is it interested in serious scientific tracing, but instead wants to use the pandemic to stigmatize and politically manipulate and to blame. The truth is there's always been circumstantial evidence to support both competing theories. Coronaviruses passing naturally from animals to humans is a known risk, especially in China. So too are lab leaks, and Wuhan has the world's largest coronavirus research institute. But there is so far no proof for either scenario, and there may never be. However much the lab leak theory becomes rehabilitated as a possibility, China is unlikely to allow another investigation on its soil.
John has some other stories from our news desk.
At least 60 people are now known to have died after a ferry sank in a river in Nigeria on Wednesday. The boat capsized on its way to a market near Wara on the Niger River. More than 50 people are still missing. Officials said the vessel had been overloaded. The Manchester United and England footballer Marcus Rashford says he's received more than 70 racist messages on social media. It follows his team's defeat by the Spanish side Villarreal in last night's Europa League final in Gdansk. And a swan, believed to be the oldest in the UK, is to celebrate his 30th birthday. He lives at Leeds Castle in Kent, where staff are getting ready for the rare milestone. Harry Bligh has the story.
Come in.
He's known as the noisiest resident on the castle's moat. Pickles is a hooper swan who arrived there in 2013. He hatched in early June of 1991, but his exact birth date is unknown. The falconry and wildlife team at the castle have chosen the 3rd of June to mark the milestone, where he'll be presented with a waterfowl-friendly cake. Hooper swans usually live around 10 years. Some in captivity live into their 20s, but with few records to go off, the team reckon Pickles is Britain's oldest swan.
That's a story from Harry Bligh.
Thank you very much, John. Highways were choked with traffic and pedestrians loaded up with belongings as tens of thousands of people fled the city of Goma after warnings of a possible new eruption of the volcano Mount Nyiragongo. More than 30 people are known to have died and thousands of homes destroyed when the Nyiragongo volcano first blew at the weekend. Local volcanologists have recorded thousands of aftershocks since Nyiragongo, which is just a dozen kilometres from Goma. Our correspondent Reha Kansara is monitoring events from Nairobi.
It's been reported that tremors that have happened in the aftermath of the volcano eruption, they are not going to stop. And we've had over at least 200 confirmed since the eruption took place over the weekend. Some of them are being felt as far as Kigali, which is the capital of neighbouring Rwanda. And thousands of people once again have been asked to leave their homes as fears grow that there could be another eruption.
Yes, 600,000 people asked to leave their homes, and volcanologists are making some quite severe predictions.
Yeah, there is a worry of gas exploding from underneath a lake that's 12 kilometres away from Mount Nyiragongo, and volcano experts are preempting a worst-case scenario as tremors continue to be felt. So if seismic activity becomes more forceful, then carbon dioxide that's trapped under Lake Kivu could rise to the surface, and this would release a methane bubble that would potentially could be deadly for those living around it. But volcano experts also say that it's unlikely that this will happen. What they're seeing is a shift in the size of the tremors, the magnitude of the tremors. It's actually there are more happening, but they're not as forceful. So this is a very big worst case scenario.
And obviously quite a problem for the government.
Yes, exactly. And they don't really know how to contain it. So it's all sort of precaution. So as far as we know, Local authorities have ordered people living in 10 neighbourhoods close to the volcano to evacuate. These are villages that are most likely to be affected by lava flow if the volcano erupts once more. But with regards to gas surfacing from a lake, we don't know anything so far, and the government are continuing with their message by telling people to remain vigilant and to listen out for more information as the situation rapidly changes and develops.
Reha Kansara monitoring events at Mount Nyiragongo in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The draw has just been made for the French Open tennis tournament, which begins in Paris this weekend. In the men's draw, there's the prospect of the defending champion, Rafa Nadal, meeting the world number one, Novak Djokovic, in the semi-finals, a match which would generate a huge amount of media interest. But if the women's second seed, Naomi Osaka, progresses to the latter stages of that tournament, the story will be what she's not saying, because the Japanese star has made it clear she won't be doing any news conferences during her time at Roland Garros, claiming they have a negative impact on her mental health. Osaka made clear her discomfort in recent news conferences.
I just didn't feel the same level of my last 2 matches. Sorry. Every time you ask me a question, I hold my breath. I'm so scared.
Naomi Osaka. But Novak Djokovic believes facing the press is part of the job.
I understand that press conferences sometimes can be very unpleasant, and it's not something that you enjoy always, especially if you lose a match or something like this. But it is part of the sport and part of your life on the tour, and this is something we have to do, otherwise we'll get fined.
Our global sports reporter Ben Sutherland thinks Osaka's stance will be supported by others in the sport.
Sport is entertainment. It's a film or it's a long-running TV series, really. And the competition itself is the action sequences, but the athletes at the press conferences, they're the actors, and when they speak, those are the lines, those are the words, and that's what we want to hear. You get a controversial moment, you want to hear what the person involved has made of it, what they feel, whether they feel it was just or unjust. We want to get those feelings, we want to get those reactions. So from that professional level, of course, no, it's not great. But look, on the other hand, we've all had days when, as a human being, we've had a rubbish time and something bad has happened to us. And the last thing that we want is to talk about it. Now, just imagine that, where the thing that you failed at or that's gone really badly has happened in front of millions of people, and now you're being asked about it, to go over it, to rake over it in front of millions of people. That obviously is going to be challenging for anyone's mental health, and that is specifically what Osaka has spoken about. She's spoken about her mental health and the difficulties that come with it. She's posted it on Twitter as an announcement herself, and so you can gauge from that some of the reactions just in response to what she said. And there's a split there, right? There are some people saying that absolutely they really sympathise, that it's got to be so hard to live through this. On the other hand, other people saying, come on, it's 10 minutes at a press conference, you're just talking about it, you are being paid millions, you've got this huge global fan base, just deal with it. So it is split that way. What I think is definitely worth saying is that women's tennis, because it's one of the few sports where there is really parity between men and women in a way that there aren't in most other sports, there are some journalists who ask, frankly, insulting or ridiculous questions at those press conferences, and you can absolutely see why some players would be very upset to have been on the end of those questions.
Our global sports reporter, Ben Sutherland. The main news this hour: scientists have created the most detailed map of how dark matter is spread across the universe. You've been listening to the newsroom from the BBC World Service.
Next is Sport Today, and then in half an hour we're on assignment.
I'm Lina Sinjab, introducing a collection of programs from Syria made during the past decade after a peaceful revolution turned into a civil war. This week, a football team who found themselves on opposing sides of the conflict.
That's followed by Science in Action. Here's Roland Pease.
Nyiragongo on the eastern edge of the Democratic Republic of Congo has been described as one of the most dangerous volcanoes in the world. So, in one sense, the devastating eruption last weekend was no surprise. But it did happen with no warning. So, what are the lessons?
At 21 GMT, it's The Inquiry.
Non-fungible tokens, known as NFTs, are digital certificates of art ownership, and they're selling for millions of dollars. We ask, what are NFTs, and are they really here to stay?
And with news every half hour, this is the BBC World Service.
Real Madrid are bidding farewell once more to one of their all-time greats. It's been one of the worst-kept secrets, but after failing to win the Spanish league title, Zinedine Zidane is stepping away. So where next, and who's next on the managerial merry-go-round, with Maurizio Pochettino and Antonio Conte also high-profile names in the spotlight? And we look ahead to the French Open with a former Wimbledon champion. Join me, Maz Faruqi, and the Sport Today team in 2 minutes after the BBC News.
BBC News, I'm John Shea. Scientists have made the most detailed map yet of the distribution of dark matter across the universe. They say the invisible substance, which accounts for about 80% of all material, is more spread out than previously thought. The findings by an international team of researchers could challenge ideas including Einstein's theory of general relativity. Political leaders in Somalia have agreed a way forward to choose a new president after months of delay and sporadic violence in Mogadishu. Efforts by President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo to extend his mandate by 2 years sparked a political crisis in April. President Emmanuel Macron has used a speech in Kigali to request forgiveness from Rwandans for failings by France linked to the genocide in 1994. He admitted that France had not listened to warnings ahead of the mass killings. More than 800,000 people were murdered in 100 days. The European Track Cycling Championships, which were due to take place next month in Belarus, have been cancelled. The decision by the European Cycling Union follows international condemnation of the forced diversion of a passenger plane to Minsk on Sunday. The Indian authorities say a devastating second wave of the coronavirus appears to be stabilising, with a steady decline in new infections in recent weeks. They say the current trend can be sustained if lockdown restrictions are lifted in a systematic manner. A Japanese government spokesman has called for an explanation after a newspaper found that entrance exams at most of Tokyo's public high schools were easier for boys to pass than for girls. Schools in the city consider girls' and boys' scores differently to meet gender quotas. And the Brazilian samba composer Nelson Sargento has died at the age of 96. Throughout his life, he'd campaigned for the preservation of traditional forms of samba. He'd tested positive for COVID-19. BBC News.
Over the wall, and it's...
To many Real fans today, I imagine.
That's right, Maz. It felt like it had been coming for weeks now. He's faced questions about his future. Many people in the media predicting he would walk away. Then on Wednesday night, European time, there were the first reports that he told the club he was leaving. And then came the official announcement Thursday morning, Madrid time, that he was going. It's totally Zidane's decision. He hasn't been sacked. But since they won the league last year, it's been far from plain sailing for him. Real couldn't stop their rivals Atletico Madrid winning the La Liga title, as you mentioned, on the final day of the season. They were knocked out of the Champions League by Chelsea in the semi-finals as well, meaning they failed to win a trophy for the first time in 11 seasons. And behind the scenes at the club, there have been difficult political and financial issues to deal with. And he really couldn't recreate that magic that he had in his first spell in charge when they won 3 Champions League titles. So he's stepping down, and Real Madrid say his legend goes beyond what he has been as a coach and player of our club. I've just been speaking to a former Real Madrid president, Ramon Calderon. He knows what it's like to appoint coaches at the club. So first of all, why does he think Zinedine Zidane left?
I'm sure he's a bit fed up of being criticized too much unfairly, in my opinion, by many journalists in the media in the last few months. I think it's a problem here to be on that bench. That's clear. In the last 47 years, only one coach, Vicente del Bosque, has been for more than 3 years in a row in that bench. On that bench. That means how difficult it is to be there. The pressure is too much. And it's a pity, because I don't think it's going to come any other coach in the next a lot of years to get what he got with us. It's been a fantastic coach in any senses, not only on the ground, but also off it, talking to the media. He has always been very, very moderate in anything he said. So very good example for Real Madrid and very good image for Real Madrid.
You've been president of Real Madrid. Is there always a plan as to who can take over next, who the next manager will be? Will they know Real Madrid who they want now?
The point here now with this president is that he's deciding. He hasn't got any advisor in football, any sporting director. It's amazing, but it is like that. He's the one who decides who is going to come, not only coach, but also players. So I don't know what he has in his mind, but it's not going to be easy. I don't know if he's thinking about Raúl or maybe Conte. I don't know, really. I think he's the only one who knows what is going to happen for that bench.
Yeah, there's 2 distinct types of manager there. Raúl would be the rookie manager. Someone like Conte would be very experienced. What type of manager would you want Real Madrid to go for next?
We have the example of Zidane. He was a rookie in the same way as Zidane, coming from a third-tier team in Spain and belonging to the club and knowing quite well the club. Maybe he's the one. And the Zidane's example has been perfect. He knew how to manage a dressing room full of stars because he was one of them. Raúl is the same case. Raúl knows much better even than Zidane how works this club. He's been with us for 20 years. So maybe he would be the good manager for the future.
And he's been in charge of the reserve team, is that right, Raúl?
Right. Now he's in Castilla. The team is in the 3rd tier. He's been fighting for going to the 2nd division, A, and he didn't get it, but he had a good, the team had good performances, and apparently he did quite well as a coach. So maybe he also had the experience in Qatar. Maybe he's ready to jump to the first team.
Yeah, vote of confidence for Raúl there from the former Real Madrid president, Ramon Calderon.
Let's bring in Spanish football expert Semra Hunter from La Liga TV now. Semra, are the fans as upset this time around as they were when Zidane quit last time 3 years ago?
I think they are definitely disappointed, but I think it's different because the last time he left, it was just a complete surprise that he sprung on us. And I don't think anybody expected it. It only came a few days after winning the Champions League. So I think that really kind of shocked Madridistas to their core at the time. This is completely different. The season started off on a different tone. He was already a bit displeased because the squad hadn't been rejuvenated. They hadn't made any signings whatsoever. The only player they brought back was somebody who was on loan already in their books, and that was Martin Odegaard. So he's never had any of those big signings that he wanted to have, like, for example, Paul Pogba or Kylian Mbappe. Never happened. So that didn't really start out very well. From then on, I think Ramon Calderón, he really stuck the right notes there. And I think what he was saying was dead on. He has been so heavily criticized at times when it seemed completely illogical. And I think it wore him down, especially when you have to remember with a Barcelona or Real Madrid, if you lose a game, maybe two, all of a sudden it's crisis, it's drama, it's all sorts of issues. The manager's going to get sacked. And it's like this all the time. And I think he just finally had enough. I think he was worn down. He's been dropping clues in press conferences. Even players have been dropping clues that he would be leaving at the end of the season for the last 3-4 months. So I think this time they are upset, but they knew it was coming. So there is a bit of a sadness. I think people really would have loved for him to stick around. He won 11 trophies during his 2 stints as manager. And unfortunately, it's his decision. He's just decided he doesn't want to stick around anymore. But the nice thing is that he and the club are like magnets, you know, they have this attraction, and it wouldn't be at all surprising to see if one day he decides to come back. He's obviously still very young. He has a very bright future ahead of him as a manager. So maybe we'll get a third stint of Zidane on the touchline one day.
John, finding a new coach, and Raúl is one of those that we've mentioned, isn't the only issue that Real Madrid have to contend with at the moment. Today, the president of La Liga has been talking about what punishments they could face for being involved in this European Super League.
Yes, because remember, Real are one of the 3 clubs yet to denounce and pull out of the European Super League project. The others are Barcelona and Juventus. And Javier Tebas, the La Liga president, today says he won't defend Barcelona or Real Madrid if they're sanctioned by UEFA for their involvement in the European Super League. This week, you'll have heard on Sport Today, UEFA opened disciplinary proceedings against Barcelona, Juventus and Real. And Tebas today was speaking at a European League's meeting, and they talked about the possibility of Real Madrid being expelled from the Champions League for 2 years. UEFA, that's a possible sanction that UEFA could put forward. There's speculation about that. And Tebas said the competition could carry on without them. The reputation of La Liga would not suffer. So various issues for Real Madrid to worry about at the moment.
Some positive news from Spanish football, though, of course. Last night, La Liga club Villarreal celebrating that remarkable win in the Europa League final on penalties, beating Manchester United 11-10. But Zidane's left Real Madrid. In France, the headlines are dominated by the future of the PSG head coach. Tottenham have made contact with their former manager, Mauricio Pochettino, about to return to the club. He was sacked by the Premier League side back in November 2019 after 5 years in charge, and he only took over at PSG in January. Could this really happen, John?
Well, the feeling in France is that it won't happen, but it's a fascinating development, isn't it? The Tottenham are trying to get him back. BBC Sport understands there's been no contact between Tottenham and Paris Saint-Germain, who have held talks with Pochettino about their plans for next season. So they're already talking about him being there next season. Paris Saint-Germain, they released an interview with him today where he talked about laying a good foundation for next season. But stranger things have happened, and he does only have 1 year left on his deal. PSG, though, will fight for him to stay, I'm sure. No one can deny, though, what a great relationship he has with the Spurs fans and what a brilliant job he did there in 5 years, getting them to a Champions League final. So it's one to watch.
Yeah, it's certainly a managerial merry-go-round. It's a cliche, isn't it? But that's what's happening in Europe at the moment. And in Italy, reports that Andrea Pirlo is about to be sacked by Juventus and replaced by the club's former boss, Max Allegri, and has been alluded to by Ramon and also by John. Champions Inter are looking for a new coach after Antonio Conte stepped down on Tuesday in Italy. So where will Conte go and who will they bring in? Here's the Italian football expert, Nicky Bandini.
Nobody knows yet where Conte's off to, and I personally won't be at all surprised if he takes a year off. I do wonder how this situation might have played out for Jose Mourinho, of course, a former Inter manager and much loved there still, if he hadn't already taken the job at Roma. But the name that's being put out in an immediate sort of quick reaction in Italy, the one that's quickly been linked, is Sergio Conceição, the Porto manager, which is definitely a situation to watch because he was previously already in talks with Napoli. So if that happens, that's going to be another knock-on impact for another big Italian club. But from his point of view, certainly, if he's looking to leave Porto, you can see how the Inter job with the opportunity to play Champions League football might be more attractive.
That's Nicky Bandini. Really, really fascinating situation across the European game with managers at the moment, and plenty of speculation, I'm sure, to come over the coming weeks. My thanks to Summer Hunter from La Liga TV and our football reporter John Bennett as well. And worth marking your card that on tomorrow's show, we will start the build-up to the Men's European Champions League final. Next to the second tennis Grand Slam of the year, we're 8 months on, we're preparing to do it all again at the French Open, which begins on Sunday. Roger Federer, in his first appearance at a major since January 2020, will play a qualifier in the first round, whilst defending champion Rafa Nadal will play Australia's Alexei Popyrin, with both men and Novak Djokovic all on the same side of the draw. Thursday's headlines, though, are all about the world number 2 Naomi Osaka, who has said that she will not take questions from the media at the French Open, saying expecting players to answer questions after a defeat amounted to kicking a person whilst they're down. At Wimbledon 2 years ago, she ended a press conference early after a shock defeat in the first round. Here's a reminder of one or two of her exchanges with journalists that day.
Going out there and playing out on center court, I'm just kind of curious, how did you find your game, playing on that court? What did you find that worked well? What did you find that worked well? And were you surprised?
I just don't think I played that well, but I wasn't surprised because I've played her twice already.
When you play someone who you lost to so recently, how hard is it not to have that in your head?
It's very hard. I don't know how to answer that.
And how do you go about sort of restoring your confidence after this? What do you do over the next few days to pick yourself up? Who helps you do that now?
I don't know. There's answers to questions that you guys ask that I still haven't figured out yet.
Naomi Osaka at Wimbledon 2 years ago, she added that her decision not to take questions from the media at this year's French Open is nothing personal against tournament organisers. Let's speak now to the 2013 Wimbledon champion Marion Bartley. Marion, what do you make of Osaka's comments today, saying that she won't speak to the media after games? As a former player on the tour yourself, she obviously cites the impact media conferences can have on players' mental health. But I guess the other side to that argument is that it is one of the requirements that you have to undertake as a professional player.
Yes, correct. It's not easy to commentate her decision from the outside. I'm sure it was not an easy decision to take because she's the first player ever, male or female, to take a decision that's so drastic. But probably she felt at the moment is the best for her.
What about the women's draw then? Because it really is wide open. No Simona Halep, but we'll have the 2019 and the 2020 champions Ash Barty and Iga Swiatek in the mix together for the first time. Who are the big contenders, do you think? And do you think we have to obviously put Osaka and also Serena up there as well?
Yeah, well, the lead-up tournament just really shown us the players in form. They are quite clear. Of course, Ashley Barty was really in great form. She did extremely well in Stuttgart, winning there. She did well in Madrid as well, reaching the final. That she carried on a small leg injury in Rome, and it was a bit more difficult for her there. But overall, she has been really in great form, defending her title in Miami and just showing that, even without competition in 2020, she was not lacking any momentum going into matches. And of course, Iga Swiatek winning Rome was just really for her, I think, a big boost before going into Roland Garros to defend her title. So I think those two players will have a say. How far they will go, my guess is it's depending how the draw unfolds and which seed is playing and which seed. But I will, I will really put the two of them at least in the quarterfinals and probably Barty going into semifinal. Minimum. I think Aryna Sabalenka could be the dark horse there, even though she never did extremely well in Grand Slam. I think she's shown enough great results since the beginning of the year to really, this time, have a say in a Grand Slam. So those players are really my three favorites, but you never can count down Serena out of any tournaments. And obviously, I'm sure the disappointment she has faced in Rome and Parme will actually help her to raise her intensity and to come up even sharper at Roland Garros, and I'm sure we'll see some great things from her. And for Naomi, I mean, the clay court doesn't really suit her game well. I don't think she's expecting a lot from herself in this tournament. I think she's going to take it as it comes. If she gets a good draw and she could get going, obviously she won the 4 Grand Slams out of the few that were played. So you can always count on her. But I just think that on clay, because she's lacking confidence, it will very much depend on how good start she can get.
Marion, I want to play this. 6-time Grand Slam champion Boris Becker has been speaking to the BBC in the build-up to the French Open, and he says for those in the men's draw, facing Rafa Nadal is the ultimate challenge.
Nadal is ahead in my book because the way he plays the game. I would rate Federer as the most talented I've ever seen. I've rated Djokovic as the most fierce I've ever seen. But Nadal, boy, when he gets going and he picks his shorts and the eyebrows and whatever, I wouldn't want to play him on any surface. But him on clay, I think it's the ultimate challenge.
Do you think it is the ultimate challenge, Marion? He's going for his 14th French Open title. Do you think he can be stopped?
Well, of course, it is the ultimate challenge, and especially in Paris, because one of the reason why Rafa has been so dominant in Paris is the clay play differently here and the courts play differently, simply because the courts are built differently. And I think that is something that is very interesting to explain to our listener. Is the clay courts, depending if you're playing in Madrid, Rome, or Roland Garros, it's not the same court you're playing on. Even though it looks like the same surface on the TV, it's actually not at all the same surface. And, the clay court in Paris are extremely specific. The way the court is built underneath is extremely specific, and that suits Rafa's game very much because the ball is bouncing a lot higher than on other clay courts that you can have in the warm-up and leading tournaments towards Paris. And that has been, of course, not the only key, but one of the key of Rafa's success over the years. And that will play in his favor once again this year, and especially going into some warmer condition compared to last year. So, of course, you have to put him once again as an overwhelmed favorite over anyone else.
And I was going to ask you about that, Mariam. This tournament's been played less than 8 months since the last French Open. Then it was cold and dark in Paris in October. How nice is it for you to have this tournament being played back under springtime skies and being able to have the fans back in Roland Garros as well?
Well, it has been really cool. Actually, I'm in Paris in some few days because we are having some rehearsal tests and training for the on-court interview. It has been quite chilly, I have to say, except today, when it's been the first day when it's actually warm and nice and blue skies. The first few days very much reminded me last October. But finally, it looks like the spring has been coming out, and we're able to have some nice weather again. One of the big difference, I think we will really feel it when the quarterfinal will come around, because it will be 5,000 spectators on center court, which then really will feel as a nice crowd. Before that, it's still going to be only 1,000 on center court on Philippe Chatrier, so it will be the same as last year, which is, it's still better than zero, of course, but it doesn't feel like a full house by any means. But going in from the quarterfinal onwards, I think it will really look very good.
Marion, thanks so much for speaking to us.
Thank you so much.
Live on the BBC World Service, this is Sport Today with Naz Faruqi.
Bit by bit, they're trying to show what women can do in motorsport. Those are the words of Eva Vigga-Lendam, who since 2019 has been coordinator of Repsol Honda, one of the most prestigious teams in MotoGP. We don't normally feature too much of the sport on this programme, but it's fair to say Eva is a trailblazer. She's the only woman, in fact, on the team who covered all the Grand Prix in 2020. She was involved with all the logistics and planning around one of the most challenging seasons, given the backdrop of the global pandemic. Ahead of this season's Italian race, I've been speaking to her about female representation in the sport and working with riders like the 8-time world champion Marc Marquez. But first, what's it like being associated with one of the biggest brands in motorbike racing?
Sometimes a lot of people say wow, you work for Honda, you know, you work with Marc Marquez, and of course I know it's a really big team, but maybe it's different if you're from when you're a kid, you're really crazy about motorsports, then you're really like, wow. For example, I always watch football, so I can imagine if one day they said, oh, you're now working in the FC Barcelona first team, you know, then maybe I would understand what it's similar like. But since I was never a big fan of motorsports, I think I have like a different feeling. I mean, I'm really proud of working in the team, and I really live like, for example, when we won the championship or when we lose, I'm also quite a competitive person, so I think this is really important. But yeah, it's really special. It's really special, especially my first year when we won the world championship. I mean, it's a really cool experience. Yeah.
It's not a sport from the outside that looks like there's a lot of women that work in it. So what did it feel like going into that environment?
It is true that there are not many women, especially if you see on television. I think the women that are there are not really visible because I think most of them work more behind the cameras. I mean, in the end, you see the men. To start with the riders, they are the stars, and in MotoGP, there are not any women. And then the mechanics, most of them are men anyways. I think still 95% of the people that are working in the garages are men. So yeah, especially when you watch from home, I think you have the feeling that it's just a man's world. It would be nice if you see in the paddock there are more women around. So, but they mostly work like behind the camera, so they're not so visible.
And having worked for the last few years with Honda and across the sport, do you get the sense that the sport is trying to make those strides and make it more inclusive in that way?
Well, I think there's still a long way to go, but I think, yeah, bit by bit, they're trying to show what women are doing in the motorsport, because you always have these stereotypes, no? And a lot of people make jokes. Sometimes when I say I work in MotoGP, they say, oh, you're an umbrella girl, you know? This is the first thing they say. And although I know it's most of the time it's a joke, this is still the stereotype that's there. So I think it's really important to show also to other girls and other women that we are many women there and what we are doing. I think there's still a long way to go. I think it would be really nice to see more women also on the bike, which I understand there's still a long way to go. But for example, in Superbike, we have some. In Moto E, there are some women. So hopefully, in some years, we see them also on the bike. I think this will motivate other girls a lot, not only to participate, but also to work in this environment.
And you talk about that relationship that you've built up with the riders. Have they got any bizarre things that they ask you for sometimes, or any weird sort of superstitions they've got? Anything that you might be able to share with us?
Well, no, not really. I think they're just really normal people. No.
Even Marc Marquez, after he won 8 world titles, he hasn't got any special requests that he has, or anything different that he wants doing?
Well, no, the only request that I had was to have a big party with like the team. So this was what we did. Because this was funny. We were actually planning. The original plan was to go home, back to Europe on Sunday after the race. But then when he won, we all went to Bangkok and we stayed there with the whole team for a big party. So this was really nice.
Well, I hope all goes well and you get a podium finish soon. That would be great for the whole team. Absolutely. Eva, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Honda's coordinator Eva Vigger-Lendam there. That's pretty much all we have time for on Thursday's programme. A reminder, there's plenty more on our website, including the news that next month's European Track Cycling Championships, which were due to be held in Minsk, have been cancelled due to the volatile situation in Belarus. Go to bbc.com/sport and we are back on Friday.
Sport Today is a BBC Sport production for the BBC World Service.
This is the BBC World Service, with Karishma Vaswani asking if globalisation has gone into reverse.
Globalisation is about open trade, but recent events have impacted this. Singapore's Prime Minister shares his country's experience.
You cannot avoid working with one another.
To go back to where you were, that way lies poverty and despair.
Globalization in reverse.
Tuesday at 8 and 19 GMT. And in 30 minutes, it's Science in Action with Roland Pease.
Nyiragongo on the eastern edge